Wes Royer, welcome to
Hey,
Responsible
Jill.
Tech Talks.
Doing good.
Good. We're so glad to have you here. I'm so glad to have you here. I am going to embarrass you a little bit off the top, like I like to do with all my guests, but I'm going to read a little bit about your background before I turn it over to you to do your own introductions. You're just a really impressive person, so it's hard to be succinct with all of your accomplishments, particularly in the product space, which is what we're going to talk about today. But
Yeah.
uh, Wes and I, just for background, worked together very early on in my career. And ever since, I think we've been sort of following each other. Wes is just down the road from me. And during that time, both working with him and since, I've always been so impressed with how user-centered Wes is when it comes to product design and development, how important it is to, do that discovery work. Wes has always been such an advocate for that. So like very much kindred spirits in that regard. But Wes is also, he's just so well versed in product. He's done all the things. He has been a product executive leading international product teams. He has shepherded new market development, really broke into new spaces. He's overseeing technical integrations. He's implemented agile practices where they didn't exist, owned strategy for all kinds of new products, advised startups, nonprofit board member, community volunteer. You're just like, I don't know, just well-rounded individual. But I'd love to hear in your own words, kind of like how you describe yourself. And if I missed
Mm.
anything in my intro you want to call out.
I mean, so we all know the biggest problem for anyone who works in product management is explaining to someone who doesn't know what that is, what you do.
Yeah.
Even your own parents, or like my dad, who was a business person, he's like, "What is a product manager?" Um, but yeah, I kind of got into this originally, started off in marketing, which then led to an actual software engineering job, and then had a product title and was like, I didn't even know what that was. So like any product person, it's a learning experience. You got to learn about your product. You got to learn about how to do the role. But that was 2 decades ago that really started. So wasn't much literature. Internet was fairly new. Agile was new. Um, but yeah, it's just been, I don't know, it's been fun. I've jumped from industry to industry and learned a lot of things, made a lot of mistakes as well. And you just learn from them. Had a lot of great managers who have let me do things the way that I thought they needed to be done, let me fail, let me succeed. So yeah, I think it's the biggest thing is that learning piece, and just making sure that you're continuously learning in product management, which I think, as we'll talk about today, is really for any role. But I think in product engineering and UX and research, it's probably even more so than maybe other functions. So
Yeah, agree. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you called out kind of the length of your history in the product space, also the various roles throughout that all, yeah, the product ecosystem is pretty vast. And even the fact that you called out like, yeah, like Agile and Scrum and all that good stuff, it wasn't really even a mature thing 20 years ago. So a lot has happened in a relatively, I think, short amount of time. So to your point about continuously learning, that tracks. I'm curious, you and I talked a lot about, and I think our talk will kind of guide us more toward the impact of AI in products specifically. And if you look at AI and how it's impacting product management today, do you see it more of like this breaking change? Do you feel like it's just one of a number of changes that we've been through? Is there something exceptional about this moment, just given your history?
So, I mean, everyone's got an opinion on this. And I think with any new technology, any new framework like Agile and Scrum and any other iterations of that, I think there's always this kind of curve that happens, right? It comes out at first, and you have a couple of proponents, and those proponents are people that actually were using it too, and they got benefited out of it. So there's a reason why they're pushing it, promoting it, writing about it, doing videos about it. Up front, it's a lot of, wow, this is going to be the changing thing, blah blah blah. And I think there is validity in any of those, including AI, and maybe especially with AI, that it's going to lead to changes. But I think we're now hitting that part of the curve, as we've seen with some research articles that have come out about everyone was pushing AI on everyone else. Use it in your job, use it, make sure your products use it. And we're seeing products that I've seen lots of papers recently where products incorporated AI, usually through some type of chatbot, right,
Mhm.
into the products. And the customer feedback they're getting is that's great, but they're not really seeing the game changing, improvement from it or value from it. And then even we've seen actual research papers now coming out showing that the companies that heavily invested very much up front with ChatGPT tools and now starting to look at agentic tools, they made some they had a vision, right, that they could cut their workforce by X%, force everyone to use the tools, and they were going to get so much more productivity and value and quality out of the work. And the research is showing that there's spots of that, but they haven't really seen like the silver bullet kind of casebook study of it doing exactly that. And so now people are rethinking, like, I've spent all this money on this. How do I get all the value out of it? And I don't think there's an easy answer to that. So I think
Mhm.
it's like agile and the internet and things like that. Just there's a time curve where everyone's excited up front. We then go through some growing pains with it. And then there'll be a maturity cycle that's going to come probably pretty soon, where people actually are discussing how it's working for them, how it's not, the things to look out for, which we can discuss later, and what then that means for everyone's role today. Like, how does the current state role of a product manager, a UX designer, a user researcher, how does that change over time? And there will be kind of a wild west of some companies will force that change quickly, successfully or not. And there's going to be companies that, just like with Agile, that don't go through a transformation of really incorporating it for years to come.
Mm.
Um, but I think there's so many variables into like what that means for the success of each of those companies and cultures that does that, that there's still a lot of waiting and seeing what happens. But I think it's the opportune time for people in our roles to become students again. If you're not already continuously learning, become that student again and at least play with the tools, even if it's for personal use. Even better if your work pays for it, but sometimes you might have to shell out the $20 a month to use one of the tools. Um, there's other packages out there too from some other podcast areas where you can get a whole bunch of the tools in one lump sum for the year, but
Mm.
you got to start experimenting with it, even if it's small and even if it's at a personal level, just so that when the change then starts to mature and come faster, you're not going to fall behind really fast at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I want to follow up on one thread and get
Yeah.
your take on this because you mentioned the word force, like maybe multiple times, or push.
Yeah.
And I think it is true that you're seeing either some organizations just it's not on their radar yet. There are some where it's like you're going to do this or else kind of
Hmm.
mentality. And at the same time, you're advocating for continuous learning amongst teams to skill up. Do those things work at odds with each other? I'm just curious about the effect of like the forcing in
Yeah.
creating a place where one can learn. So yeah, what's your take on that?
I mean, we've seen some of the CEO letters or internal memos, right, where leadership has said, you will use these tools or you will likely not have a job here in the future. Um, I actually do like when they say you need to use the tools to know how to actually incorporate AI into your products. So that I think there's a mental connection there between those two things. So to your question, it's not necessarily the forcing it that's necessarily bad. I think it's how they do it and maybe the
Mm,
expectations they set, but they also have to provide the tools if you're going to do that, right? Um, I think there's a way to come across that we would like to force learning on you, right? We want you to continuously learn so that each person in the company benefits from it and the company benefits from it, right? I think some of the messages that have come out, it's very, very kind of numbers driven, very do it or you're out of the company. type thing. And sometimes they include messaging that you should be constantly learning, which I totally agree with. But the company has to think about how they're going to support that instead of just putting the messaging out there.
Mm,
Because sometimes the messaging feels like it's there for just the messaging. Like it's there
mm,
for shareholders to see
mhm,
that, oh, this guy's gonna push this and they're gonna revolutionize the company and maybe the industry by doing that. But there needs to be more kind of structure, support, empowerment for learning, see the rewards of the learning. That has to be laid out too. I don't
mm,
think, think of it this way. I don't go why would I pay to go get a certification or go get my MBA if there's not gonna be some type of reward at the end of it, right?
mm,
And not just getting a better job or keeping my job. Like,
mm,
what are the other rewards? And I think those are the things that need to be spoke to. And some of those are actually just personal reward, personal satisfaction that you can do these things, being able to go into a room where maybe there's other people that don't have as much experience and you can actually coach and mentor them now on that. Go into a room where people do have that experience and now you feel like you can keep up. Like I think we need to
mm.
speak to all of that kind of mental part of it as well, like the mindset part of it. And that's again, it's learning and what the kind of personal value props are for that, not just the company part of it. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and so again, I think that's goes back to I feel like software engineers, UX people, and product people, the good ones, the ones who continue to grow and innovate and move faster, are the ones who try to learn more and more. I think with AI, there's so many tools to choose from.
Mm,
There's maybe there's blogs that have like, well, here's tips and tricks on how to prompt engineer and do this, but there's a little less structure right now on it.
mhm.
So the company needs to provide support for those that are not as learning inclined, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. So this is fascinating. I love the amount of nuance that you introduced into the types of motivations that people have. And it's not always like based on the stick. There's carrots and there's all kinds of different carrots that people respond to. So knowing that you are, you're a team leader. So you're kind of interpreting these mandates amongst executive leadership and you are trying to enact them, within your teams. And I'm wondering what you have tried or the friction points that you've encountered as we're in this kind of early adoption phase. Not everyone is diving into it with
Mhm.
like both feet. Why is that? And what have you thought about in terms of getting people moving
Yeah.
in that
So
direction?
I mean, just because I think the audience is understands kind of the agile life cycle that's happened, like in that we're kind of in this phase two now. Where people are asking, is agile still really
Yeah.
a separate thing to talk about? Even
Yeah.
um, so I want to use that just because I think it's fresh in people's minds and the pitfalls plus the successes of it. So, one of the things that I think this AI evolution is similar to that in regards is that an organization or a leader may decide, hey, I really want us to look at using this again, a software, a framework, a technology, whatever.
Mm,
And you're always going to have on that team people who resist that change and people are like, yeah, let's try it. Right. And then you're going to try it and you're still going to have some people that are like, oh, this is great. But you're still going to have a couple people that are like, I still don't know if I like this. Don't know if I want to be here because of this. And that's all normal. Right. Um, I think the thing that's different is when you come into a team and say, I want you to use Agile or Jira, right? The whole team has to do it. Like there's no only a couple people can use it
mm,
and it benefits the team.
mm,
With these tools, you actually could in this way have a couple people on the team that really do embrace it and use it and a couple that don't. And that's maybe doesn't cause as much friction up front because you're not forcing the whole team to do it.
mm,
And I think that's okay at first because there's still work to do, right? Like you have to learn how to use something new and there's still daily work that you have to do, right? And so those who embrace it and either figure out how to manage their workday to do it or do it after work because they're going to try it for other things, that's great. Because what then can happen, and this is again where I think it's a little bit different than agile. So I think about agile coaches, or I think about even my experience of where like taking one team and moving them down that kind of digital transformation with the team model on agile. I you again, you have to get that whole team to do it, and then you have to get whole other teams to be influenced by it to see the trickle effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here it's even more grassroots because you can have a couple people on the team do it, and then they'll influence other people on the team to be like, oh well, how did you do that? How did you make that so much faster and easier to do? How'd you get more information to make the decision, and actually parse it to something that's you can actually make a decision from.
Hmm.
You can now do that at that lower level, not the team level, but the individuals. So
Hmm.
the individuals can start influencing the team, and then that team could start influencing not whole other teams, but it could also just influence other individuals in the organization.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit different. I think it's faster, right?
Oh,
Because
interesting.
I would assume you would have greater friction trying to get a whole team of 5 to 10 people
Hmm.
to move on a new technology and do it on a regular basis, as opposed to getting a couple cheerleaders with on the team who are like really eager to do it, and then they can sprinkle it in the team. It in a way, it kind of takes that directive part from management down out of the picture and brings
Hmm.
more of the bottom up kind of influence of some people are going to get jealous when they look over at someone and say, well, you use that tool to do that. I wish I could do that. Show me how.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's just a different dynamic because again, you can do it at the individual level. You don't have to do it at the team level. And that's always been a problem of like, again, forcing Jira or Agile or Scrum or even CI/CD and other technologies like Bitbucket versus GitHub, like that, those types of things. You have to force that on a whole team, sometimes a whole organization. This is different, right? I can
Hmm.
sprinkle it in with a couple people and then try to move faster with that kind of more grassroots approach to it.
Hmm. Let me ask then, what does this kind of slightly different adoption pattern demand of leadership? It feels, I mean, I don't know if this is scary for some leaders, but there's not a whole lot of control. It's different than a mandate, as you said. And you're trusting this innovation to kind of organically diffuse. Maybe. What does that require of leadership to nurture, sustain, guide? Like, yeah. And is it a new skill set in some respects?
I'll come back to the skill set part. I think the three primary things are support, right? Are you going to allow them to do less or spend less time in this area so that they can ramp up on the tools in that time? So it's the support piece. And then kind of part two of the support is, are you going to actually provide them with the software to do it, right? Because you can pay for licenses, right? Um, but then once you give them that power, right? And it's really what it is with some of these
Mm,
tools, you also have to have governance, right? And governance is for this particular tool is much bigger, I think, than we've had for
mm,
anything else before. Maybe cloud would have actually been like a closer kind of representation,
mm,
like, hey, we're putting everything outside the data center,
yeah.
putting it up in the clouds. Like, what's the governance around that? How are we keeping things secure in transit? That type of thing.
Mm,
But with AI, right, it's you have some of those similar things. Like, how do I keep the data private? Right.
yeah.
So do I want people in my company to take information that is probably priority, right? Trade secret even. Do I want them to type out a prompt in a public version of Claude or Copilot or Perplexity or whatever and use that in a question? Because now that system is going to have that phrase, those words, and now it's out in public. You have to know how to get it out back in public, but there's ways now that you've kind of leaked that information.
Mm,
And so there has to be governance about what can I use these tools for versus tools that maybe that we have a private LLM that we're curating and keeping in there. So you're allowed to put any company or client information to that because it's not going to go outside of our company walls. Um, you also have to have governance around quality checks, right? I think one of the pitfalls that we're seeing up front is while I can go and use Lovable or a couple other tools to build a new app or even re-platform an app, if like create a new version of an old one, I can't just throw that out on to a cloud server and say, all right, everyone use it, right? What checks are you going to have that the code passes all of your company's data privacy rules and laws, also laws like so that it's ethical the way it's done, that the UX, the UI is following, if you have one, what's your UX design system? Is it following that? Which sometimes is related to privacy and data as well. Is it using your corporate brand messaging, especially with bigger companies? It becomes more and more important because you can't just throw it out there. It's got to actually, it needs to have audit eyes on it, if you will. So all the people that have been both designing, coding, and releasing things, maybe we've made the coding part and the designing part easier, but now they have more work on the back end of reviewing it, making sure it meets all of our standards and guidelines from a company perspective and a law perspective. So it's kind of a shift, right? Use the tool to be more efficient up front, but watch out. You got to be very careful that what you put out there is not going to damage your business, right? Because you didn't check for, again, data privacy, design systems, things like that that could be impacted.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that as a huge friction point. It's like you have a lot of maybe individual accountability paired with a lot of uncertainty about what's even allowed. And so it's just like, yeah, it does not facilitate confident adoption or
Yeah.
efficiency with these tools
I
either.
mean, even if you're an individual, right, and you come up with a new app idea, like anyone could do this before, right?
Yeah.
Is when app stores first came out for the phones, there was definitely some Wild West there.
Hmm.
People could get their SDKs and build an Apple app, build an Android app. Um, but at some point, the App Store started to put in the security checks when you would submit every single release of your app to make sure that you were abiding by GDPR and data rules that they had, right, and advertising rules that they had. So those stores kind of stepped in for there so that an individual creating an app or a company weren't going to get themselves or the stores in trouble with their customers or in lawsuits.
Hmm.
It's kind of similar here, right? So an individual could build an app and be a web hosted app, but who's verifying that it meets like standards that that individual could get sued for, right? Because I built this app to do X, and it's a web-based app. Customers came in, started paying for it, and bam! All of a sudden, someone had access to all the payment data. Um,
Yeah, it's a great
you know,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah. So in a way, it increases the risk for that. And I think in a company environment, as long as we have the governance, then I think that risk can be mitigated pretty easily because you'll have the governance, and you already have some existing governance around what you deploy and how.
Hmm.
Um, but I think for startups or individuals that want to try to start a new business, there's extra risk because they can move so fast now,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
might not have because they're one person. They might not have all of that experience and skill set that a DevOps person has, a development lead has, a QA person has, a data security person, a UX person. They don't. I mean, unless you're a unicorn, you don't have all of that functional experience. You usually have maybe one or two of those. So I think that's just something governance being provided along with the support is 100% needed. Otherwise, companies could get in trouble
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
individuals can get in trouble as well.
Well, I had a question about, well, we can come back to the skill set for leadership question at some point, but based on what you were talking about speed, I think this is interesting in a product environment. And I'm curious to get your take, because one of the questions I wanted to put to you was friction points that this new technology is making. We talked about some, but the speed one is interesting to me because as someone very left on the product development life cycle, so research strategy, discovery, requirements gathering. We've always been pointed at as like you're like too slow. Like you need to like make sure you're ahead of development and feeding those requirements in. And it's already that's been a tension. And I think it still is. I wonder if this exacerbates the tension a little bit. This being like, AI supported coding tools that just make it easier to move faster with, yeah, the coding, the development.
Yeah.
And if that's true, what do you do about it?
So this, I think what I said before still applies, right? So maybe we can, as far as doing user research, maybe we can actually do a lot of the grunt work faster.
Mhm.
But just because I'm able to collect more data and find more data faster than I was before, and I'm able to parse or organize it maybe faster than I was able to do before. Because I know that's a big part of user research is you can get a ton of qualitative and quantitative data in, and then you have to spend a lot of time thinking about what insights am I actually pulling out? Like, what is it actually telling me? Where do I have false positives or it's on the edges of the bell curve? So we really shouldn't pay attention to those. Um, so I think we can get through some of that faster, but if I'm asking a chatbot to say, take all this data and tell me what I should care about, obviously you would type up a prompt. It's much more graceful than that. But um,
Maybe.
Maybe. Well, I mean, that's a very good point. Maybe,
Yeah.
depending on who you are, but, and it also takes a lot of practice to write something that's gonna give you the better, answer. How do you know that what it's told you is actually trustworthy? I mean, it's kind of an ethics thing, but it's also just a quality control thing,
Mhm.
and I think again, maybe we can shorten some of that user discovery work up front, but it's still necessary before we just go off and build things. Um, think of it this way. So I know for the past decade, there's been this fail fast mantra, right?
Mhm.
And that you have to test things in the market to see what actually sticks. Sometimes through user research, you don't always get the right answer or
Mhm.
you don't find the right answer in the data. And that's fine. I mean, it's normal. So you do have to like release fast, see what people say, iterate, right? That's all normal for software development today. But what do we want to end up where we're using Lovable or Replete to release a new version of something every day? Like, I feel like then from a UX and a user research perspective and a product perspective, now what? You're going to have daily amounts of data that you have to parse through.
Mhm.
Are you actually gonna be able to keep up with that? Like, you're almost making it worse by saying, "Well, we're gonna move so much faster that we're
Yeah.
gonna go through this stuff faster, get results, and see if it sticks." And I think we end up then creating maybe more work for ourselves.
Hmm.
I think we can move faster, but let's not go so fast that we're just making mistakes to make mistakes.
Mhm.
And then we really don't. The other thing is, how long does it actually take to have something out in the market to get the right answers to whether it's successful, right?
Yeah.
It's not always that the software is great. It's also, did you market it? Do you have the right branding, the right messaging for it?
There's
Are
seasonality to account
yeah,
for, variability.
based on, yeah, your personas could be seasonal. I mean, I think most personas are seasonal, but yeah, all of that comes into a factor. And so that's why I think it's important for individuals in every function to be experimenting with the tools, but then at some point, and maybe this is where governance helps too, every function on the team needs to come together and explain how they are using it
Hmm.
so that the product person knows how a product marketing person is using it to create messaging, so that everyone on the team knows what the user researcher did, what they even prompted with to get the insights that they got, that the UX designer, what did you use as prompts? What did you tell it to do to build a front end interface? And then,
Mm.
of course, the developers, yeah, what did you do to say, go build this database and go build this
Mm.
middle tier layer and deploy it like this with this type, all of
Wow.
those things. I think it becomes, I guess, communication becomes even more important
Mm.
because even today, you can have developers that are still kind of at their desk in a silo. They just look at the Jira ticket, don't ask many questions, and build. Well, if they're starting to do that faster, they're gonna have to start communicating a lot more what they're building and what they prompted to build it.
That's fascinating. It's like code review with prompts as code.
It is. It's like again, I think it's we can get faster up front, and that's great. But now there's more code review, I think, to
Mhm.
do. More
Hmm.
code review, more QA, more user testing on the back end. And
Hmm.
so if that's the case, great. It might mean that we can get to releases a little bit quicker, especially like beta releases.
Mhm.
Um, but we're still gonna need someone to, like, check that it actually isn't breaking something, that it isn't breaking a law, that it isn't, doing anything unethical. Um,
Mhm.
those types of checks, I think, come more to the forefront than maybe they even were before.
Interesting. So I'm gonna ask you to like imagine, and this is one thing I just so appreciate about you is that we talked before about some leadership messaging centering around we want you to move faster, and one of the implied or stated goals is to reduce workforce, which doesn't inspire a lot of like,
No.
oh, let me jump onto this bandwagon. But I think you have a different view. If you imagine AI tools being integrated into the way we build optimally, how would you see the benefit of that? Again, in an ideal world, like
Yeah.
manifesting, like what would you like to see happen?
So in my perfect world, because everyone's got a different perspective,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be seeing reducing the workforce. I would say, "Great, now we can do more innovation than we did before. We can test more things than we did before. So use the existing workforce, and now I can do more." I think, though, that's gonna depend on the organization,
Mm.
right? Every organization has different strategies and visions and guidelines that they're doing to run their business. If I'm if I'm an organization where I'm not really looking for innovation, I'm looking to just have a single product, and I'm just trying to make that product the best that it can be, then yeah, maybe that is kind of the thought is, well, I can reduce workforce and now I can maintain and enhance for however long this product and continue to get sales growth.
Mm. Hmm.
But if you're in a company where you have older products and you already have a significant market share, then that model works maybe for the individual products, but what are you going to do innovation wise to actually beat your competitors? And that's
Hmm.
not always a goal to beat your competitors. Sometimes it is just growth, but what are you going to do from an innovation perspective? Because a lot of times, especially if you're a public company, shareholders are looking for what new products are you going to release.
Hmm.
And if you're stuck today in a cycle that's really focused on feature factory and retention, right? You're probably not doing much innovation and you're not carving out people to do it. Well, if I cut the workforce because I don't need as many people, hypothetically, to maintain my feature factory and retention, then I still don't have anyone to do innovation. So
Hmm. Hmm.
so why not use those people for innovation?
Wow. I am making a mental note. I have spent a greater proportion of the time thinking about AI and its impact on product, like the product development life cycle, but less so about the product life cycle itself and the product like portfolio. That's a part. So that's a really interesting note that I'm going to chew on a little bit more to think about the strategy at that level as well. So this brings us back, maybe. I'm going to bring us there
Yeah.
regardless. The skill set question for team leaders and product or executive leaders, or really at whatever level in the organization you care to speak to. But I'm curious if you're seeing a need for a way to rethink how we lead, or is it just a different flavor of like what was good practice anyway? Just curious your thoughts.
I mean, I would kind of argue it's not a new skill that's been needed. It's probably the same one just applied to a different topic, different technology, right? So, in my opinion, good leadership is already, forget AI is even on the table.
Mhm.
They already have been through the years trying to grow their team. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean a bigger team per se. It means to grow, like help those teams grow their skills, their proficiency, um, how they get better outcomes. So how they make their job easier. I mean, that's actually a totally relevant thing to do as well. So if you haven't been doing that all along and now you're being asked to implement AI on your teams or in your products, I think you're going to struggle maybe even more or quicker in this phase because things are moving what seems faster than other processes and technologies have.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and maybe for some leaders, that'll actually be an eye-opening point where they become more of that. How do I upskill my team on a regular basis?
Mhm.
How do I encourage them to do these tools? How do I let them know the benefits and also the risks if they don't at
Mhm.
least experiment with those tools?
Mhm.
Um, Again, if you weren't doing that all along with everything else that's comes along every couple of years, that's revolutionizes the industry, I think you'll struggle with this as well. And I think it is helpful when the leader themselves dabbles in the tool. And I think with AI especially, I think that's actually easier,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I can go use a free version, limited number of like prompts or hours of any of the big ones that are out there now. Um,
Mhm.
my phone company gives me free pro access to Perplexity, so I can use that
Mhm.
whenever I want. A lot of people have Microsoft Office 365 at work, so they probably have access to some version of Copilot.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's easier for leaders with this type of tool to actually experiment themselves, whether it's for personal or even professional purposes. Some technologies in the past, like, is a CTO going to experiment with CI/CD? Like, no, right?
Mhm.
Is a
Yeah.
leader going to
Hmm.
themselves really experiment with Agile or
Hmm.
Scrum?
Hmm.
Maybe not, depending on what level they're at. But with this one, it's almost like a, I say tool, it's almost like a toy. Like they can play with it now.
Hmm.
The more that they do, now they actually understand at a much lower level. And when they talk to the team, hey, try this. I did this. I took a bunch of sales data we had and I was able to create new segments for our customers.
Hmm.
Let's talk to sales about that. Like anyone can do that, right?
Yeah.
You still need people in sales and other groups to validate that what you did was even, or what the AI produced was even useful,
Mhm.
right? That's that quality check, but
Hmm.
anyone can experiment with that. So I think that's probably the one piece that's different. So the piece that's
Yeah.
the same is you should have been encouraging upskill and learning and growth all along
Yeah.
with your team. And if you weren't, shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this one, this is actually a tool with many different variants of it that you can play with yourself. And I think that's very different than it has been in the past.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that before. It's like a potentially democratizing
Yeah,
force across
it
an
is.
org in some ways. That's fascinating.
But the thing you do have to be careful of, and I think this is something I didn't mention before when you were talking about friction.
Mhm.
It democratizes it, but you have to do it in a graceful way where you don't create friction by a non-UX person going to a UX person and saying, I did this.
I can do your
UX,
job now. It's easy.
if it comes across like that, then that's
Huh.
bad. That should not be happening. That's not helpful.
Mm,
If you go to the UX person and said, hey, I was experimenting with a tool and I wanted you to look over this because you're the expert.
hmm.
Like approaching just that messaging of that, now the UX person is like, oh, this is kind of cool. Let me look at this and let me go in and start making tweaks off of it as well. That's different. So you do have to be careful when you democratize it, that you don't make people in one function feel like you're telling them that anyone can do their job, because I still don't think that's the case. And I think that's where I think some of the early messaging was a little bit dangerous around, I can build my own app. I don't need a team.
Yeah.
Product managers could become developers, or the developers can now do their own research, come up with their own requirements, blah, blah, blah. You still need the individual functional expertise to do that gut check, that actual data check, whatever it is, to say, yes, we're doing the right thing here. And by right, I mean
Mhm.
it provides value, it's ethical, all of that.
Secure. Yeah. Mhm.
Otherwise, we're just throwing crappy software out into the universe, and we'll throw out, if we were releasing, if the world was releasing 100,000 things a day, now we're going to release millions of things a day. Why?
Yeah.
How is that helpful? Because now you're just diluting the marketplace.
Yeah.
No
Users.
user or
Yeah.
customer knows where they should go first. The big brands will win, or the viral brands will win at first, until people realize that the product actually isn't that good. So you still need those
Mhm.
functional areas to put their eyes, their expertise, their brains, their
Mhm.
human element on the result of what the tools give them.
Yeah. Yeah. I just finished up a little debrief of I vibe coded my website, and I know basic website development, but originally the AI, built it as an app with way more complexity than it was
Yeah.
needed for a few static pages. And that was, and then of course there was some kind of irrecoverable file corruption and it didn't work. And I was like, this is exactly why you still need
Well,
developers.
your complexity comment is awesome, because that that's the build trap that Melissa Perry talks about in her
Mhm.
book, right? Is
Yeah.
the um we just keep adding and adding and adding and making something more complex, but then users aren't using 80% of the things you put in there.
Yeah.
Or you're just building up tech debt because now you've got so much stuff in there you can't even maintain what you have, as opposed to really, again, functionally each area knowing what is the core thing that our
Yeah.
customer needs, and let's do that very, very, very well. But yeah, your example of you're building a website, I'm assuming more of kind of like a marketing website,
Mhm.
and it's going to give you all this complexity in an app. It's like, no, I just needed basically like a landing page.
Well, form and like 5
Yeah,
pages. Yeah, it was something, but,
yeah,
I learned a lot. But, yeah, so I'm so glad to see that we have comments and questions, and I assure folks we will preserve time to get to those. I wanted to address one other topic because before we were doing this, chat, we dove into, like, future product people, like that
mhm,
topic of, like, the next generation of folks, and of course,
yeah,
as we talked about, like, there's a huge question about like AI's impact on the workforce. Still, probably don't know. There's a lot of conflicting information about what's truly real about that. But I know that you have a really fascinating perspective on, how the next generation of graduates is, basically skilling up to be prepared to enter into some of these roles, and then when they do, what that means for organization leaders, in managing that, because that's going to be a cultural shift as well, driven by, I think, this, to some extent, this technology. So that's a big setup for you. But I
no,
wonder
no,
if you care to share, yeah, your thoughts on that and some specific examples.
yeah. So I mean, and I think I'll loop back in the friction thing at some point on
Hmm.
this as well. But so the college I went to, George Mason University, um, I was reading their alumni magazine,
Yeah.
and they had a whole section in the middle of it, a feature section on how they were incorporating AI. And it was kind of thoughtful in the way they did it, because they broke it down into where and how they're allowing AI to be used by students in class and in their homework and things like that, in projects. They went through some of the research that they're doing around AI, because it is a research university. Um, and they even broke down by each college, right? So business, computing, um, kind of the classes and courses that they're creating, or even new degrees that they're creating based on it. But I thought it was really interesting because when you read that, if you hadn't thought about it yet, that means that when these kids come into the workforce, they're basically going to be AI native. They're going to, or at least prompt native, I think is probably the best thing to
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
And there's pros and cons to that. So if you paired up one of these prompt native people straight out of college next to um, a more tenured product manager, I think pairing it up would be a good idea, because a tenured product manager has got product gut. They've got experience without using that tool and what's worked and what hasn't. They're still learning. I would hope that someone who's only using prompt engineering to do most of their job within a product area, that they wouldn't rely on it so much that they don't actually learn or gain that experience that the 10-year product manager has 10 years later.
Hmm.
And I would also hope that that tenured product manager would look at that AI native person and say, hey, can you help teach me? Because I've been playing with it and I still feel like I'm struggling with the prompt engineering. Can you teach me what you learned in school and actually using it? Like, show me ways to use it for my job. The friction, I think, is going to come where, again, if you don't have the right leadership, is the leadership going to look and say, well, I don't need the tenured people because I'll just bring in these AI native kids and they're going to do all the work. But then you lose all the experience around the ethics and the governance and all that, and the quality control and knowing functionally what's right and what wasn't. So I think that's some of the frictions that comes in, is I think some of the tenured employees will be like, oh, great, I have to learn this thing. But we all know, can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? You can, but sometimes it's a little bit slower, especially when you already have a full-time job.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas you have people coming in, just like you and I have kids that are probably mobile native, whereas you and I did not grow up mobile native, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's similar, right? We definitely use this thing all the time now, but it probably took us longer to become proficient at using it. Whereas the kids, like, I don't know, they were 5 and they were becoming proficient in it.
Yeah, everything was tappable. I
Really was
remember,
having,
like, why do you just assume that? But yeah.
right, exactly. And so I think it's the same thing with prompting. Like, yeah, they're going to be more kind of naturally proficient at the prompting piece, and not for everyone, but you know, that's where those generations are going to collide. And I think they need to actually work together on that so that they don't create that friction. But that also means that leaders need to not forsake the tenured employees just because you may have a lower cost AI native employee that you can get out of the colleges. And don't do the reverse either. Don't be like, oh, well, my tenured people can learn it, and so I don't even need to hire fresh people anymore. Because then you're going to create a whole leadership gap somewhere
Yes.
along the line too, because you won't have junior people moving up through the ranks to a senior role or a leadership role, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a gap, and they're going to be like, oh, what do I do 20 years from now when there's no one?
Yeah, creating all kinds of debt, I think. And I think
Yeah.
what I love about your vision and that insight that you have about the ways that these different generations can work together is that it can also, in the same way that the technology can be itself democratizing. I think you can build bridges. Like that's a mechanism to really connect people, rather than what you hear a lot in the media, where it's just kind of zero sum game kind of
Yeah.
in the reporting. So I think that's refreshing. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, we have a bit of time for questions. So, folks, if you do have them, please enter them. I'm going to read some of the comments and questions we've received so far. One person noted, if we expand on the Agile framework, what AI ceremonies need to evolve for product teams to ensure quality and velocity? That's interesting. I never thought of that. Yeah.
I mean, tactically, something that comes to my head right away is, so I'm actually a fan of retrospectives and reviews, right? That ceremony. I kind of like it when they're put together, but that's an argument for another day. But I like it because I think some people go into sprint reviews and retrospectives, especially after years of doing it with, oh, great, here's another half-hour meeting to do it. Maybe it doesn't have to be a half hour. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves. But I think it's good to do it and air that feedback that comes out of it. But then the problem that happens is a lot of times that feedback's not turned into action.
Yep.
It happens all the time. And so even though we put notes into Confluence or wherever we put it, it says, here's the meeting notes from the retrospective, and so recommended this, said we should stop doing this, keep doing this. It just becomes meeting notes and no one ever looks at it again. What if we started using, whether it's a chatbot or eventually agentic AI, some tool to take those meeting notes and actually create action items for us, like even put them in Jira as tasks that, oh, we're going to change this and we need to figure out when we're going to do it, so it could be very tactical, in the weeds type things like that, to look at how we use these tools to keep us honest with ourselves about the things that we've already discussed. I don't know that, like, for the rest of the question, I don't know yet, like, how it changes Agile. Like, part of me says, if you go back to the original Agile
Manifesto. Yep.
manifesto, does this allow us to actually reset back to that a little bit more, as opposed to the scaled Agile framework and all these other spawn-offs and whatever hydras of it that have happened?
Yes.
Does it kind of bring us back to fundamentals, and then we can actually go from there? But I don't know yet. I think it's a really good question. It's probably a great discussion for a whole nother one of these podcasts, and not with me, but with someone, maybe the
Yes,
person,
so LinkedIn user who is
yeah,
not
maybe with them, to actually say, well, what would you do for it? Yeah, because I think that would be a really good discussion.
Yeah. Well, something that you said, I've been thinking about this. This is also probably for another discussion, but I have just been wondering if this technology is really prompting us in many ways, technically and otherwise, to like retrench in fundamentals. I mean, you were talking about the extra importance of communication. We were talking about like maybe going back to the manifesto. I think with a lot of the like synthetic data poisoning, like all of the, risks out there, like maybe we really need to talk to people. So the ground truth is still, persists in some way, but I don't know yet either, but it's been something I wonder about.
Yeah, I agree. I think with all of these, any new technology that comes along, I think it is a good time to ask ourselves, should we go back to the fundamental of which all the things we're already using, right? Should we go back and look at it real quick and say, have we kind of created a monster of it? And can we actually go back to the raw piece of it and start over with these tools? But
Yes.
again, I think that's really a discussion, right? Like I said, I think it's a great topic for a later session. I think it's a great topic for the teams that are asking that question.
Yeah. And probably why, people aren't seeing the immediate ROI. We talked about like if this is a
Yeah.
transformative technology, that's not the only thing that should be changed. Like we can't just like add it on the chatbot
That
example
is an
or just slap it on the
amazing
surface.
It's an amazing point, right? There's oh, let's use this process, let's use this process, let's use this technology, this. We keep just kind of like a feature factory in a product.
Yeah.
If we treat the process like a product, we're just bolting things on and we're not actually getting rid of the tech debt itself, right? So
Yeah.
we do need to revisit and say, well, if we're going to introduce this new tool, so into the agile process, like the person asked, then should we actually look at maybe trimming off some of the other things that we had been doing?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're kind of adding to the chaos or the noise that you already have?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. That was a
Is
generative
it
one. Love
actually
it.
a great question?
Yeah. We have another one, maybe just a comment, which is also lovely, from Kelly Blackman. So insightful and thought-provoking, Wes Royer. Thank you for sharing your perspective and guiding responsible IT innovation and leadership. Which that does beg a question that I need to ask you before we
Yeah.
wrap up, because I asked it of everyone and I didn't yet. How do you define responsible technology?
Ooh, so many ways you can go with that. I think I look at it different ways. So making it responsible for the organization you work at, even if you're organization of one, is, are you building something ethical? Are you building something that's going to provide value to customer, which would then probably mean that you're providing value, revenue to the corporation or the company? Um, but then also, are we being responsible with our, I don't know if responsible is the word, but I think, are we being honest with ourselves as a team, the creators of it? Are we being responsible ourselves that we're building the right thing? Because if we build the right thing, we're probably gonna have more fun doing it.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
always a job,
Hmm.
but the more we can make the job enjoyable, then I think when you really get the team to really be accountable and empowered for building the right thing and defining what the right thing is, I think that's like another piece of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's always ethical, secure, all of that, but like, is it actually solving a problem for the user? Um, or am I solving what I think is a problem and I'm actually creating more work for them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Um, that's kind of what I think is responsible, is like, are you really solving the right problem? And then are you doing it in an ethical, secure, efficient type of way?
Yeah, it makes me think of the example we talked about, like the wrong tech stack for the like it, maybe there's a form of waste in when you're irresponsible
Yeah.
with the technology. And yeah, I
Well,
think that's
that's a big thing. Like thinking at a personal level, everyone went and digitized their photography, like photos, family photos, and things like that. And
mhm.
now, hey, can you go find a photo with so and so? And it's like, oh, I have
That's so funny.
10,000 photos and videos I have to go through for the past 10, 20
Well,
years, right? All in a digital locker.
mhm.
And so, yeah, we create now we're digital hoarders. And so we shouldn't be
Yeah.
digital hoarders with our software as well. Like we shouldn't just be throwing things out in the universe. We shouldn't just be throwing features onto products. We should be building the right thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's actually a responsibility there, is building the right thing, which sometimes means taking things out as
Mm.
well. So
Mhm. Agree. That's awesome. Thank you, Kelly, for the comment. And we have also a comment from Dan Funk. Hi, Dan. He shared a link to a podcast, and it's with Sal Khan of Khan Academy, on education and AI, and that is extremely hopeful, he
I have
says.
watched it and it is a really
Yeah.
good, yeah. And
Awesome.
again, here they're talking about it because they are, and that Khan Academy goes after much younger than college
Mhm.
kids. But I have kids in middle school and high school, and they are allowed to use some approved AI tools for the things they work on. So they're already at that age becoming much more native with the tools
Mm.
than tenured people that are in the workforce already. Um, so it's definitely something we have to think about. Like, tenure employees are going to have to adapt and meet up with them and learn from them. But we have the opportunity as tenured employees as well as leaders to actually make sure that they are being responsible with those tools, ethical with those tools, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
there's a lot
Yeah.
to learn both ways.
Also, how are they high school and middle school? I'm with you, but I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Anyway, yes. And then we got another comment from Muhammad. Always very refreshing and insightful listening to Wes share his perspectives on product and technology. So you have another fan, not surprising.
I know Abdullah well, and I know Kelly pretty well too. So
Great. Well, plants. Yeah, thank you. Sure. Yes, you're welcome. It's my pleasure, really, Wes. It's been overdue. I've always loved what you share. Well, in person, but on LinkedIn as well, because it's some of the most kind I want to say it's inspiring content. You're always, I feel like, advocating for like the right things for human beings. And I don't know if that's a definition of responsible tech, but it feels like it. And I just appreciate that you continue to so eloquently, fight that fight.
Yeah. Well, I worked at an agency for a short time. I'm gonna steal their slogan that they had, which was to make digital human. And I
Oh,
actually still to this day love that term. So yeah, I think goes back to the responsible, all of that is just we're using digital to improve the human experience.
yeah.
If we completely remove the human experience, then what's the point in building the digital?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we've done it. Or exactly now. I want to thank everyone for joining and for Wes's fan club for showing up for him today. It's awesome to see. And we hope to catch you on the next one. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.